All right, Brian, here we go, man. Your SP Sabers Darkness V3 is finished. This is your overview video. Sit down, get comfortable. We're going to go over everything about your saber, the install, how to handle the lightsaber, what to do, what not to do. That way you handle everything properly and you protect your investment and cherish this iconic masterpiece of a lightsaber. So when you get your box, most everything will be in the box except for the main blade and probably the side blades. I'll put in a separate wrapping, but it'll all be in one big box. Sleeve slides off. Top of the box comes off like an iPhone box. Once we get to the inside, first thing you'll see on top is your paperwork. So I print this stuff for everybody. This has the configuration or the layout of your fonts and your presets for your Profi board. So we have both K-Sith and Kyber Phonic Kylo Ren sound fonts on here. They're the best in my opinion. And they come with all these extras and different ignitions and hums and quotes and background tracks, all from the different movies as well. So I configure this in my own custom way to give you basically everything that those fonts have to offer. So we have a total of 6 fonts on here, 4 from K-Sith, 2 from Kyber Phonic, okay? It tells you the quote. As you're cycling through the fonts or the presets, you'll hear quotes, and it tells you, when you show me again the power of the darkness, you'll know this is the first one. And then it tells you what movie it's from, The Force Awakens, what kind of blade ignition it has. This has simultaneous blade ignition and things like that. So some of them have alternate hums as well. So this kind of tells you your sound fonts and the way that that's all laid out. So use this, refer back to it. That way you know what your configuration is. You have a copy of your configuration file on the SD card if you wish to do changes or add fonts or things like that. You have a template or a base to start with. Just make a copy of it on your own computer before you tweak anything on it in case you mess up. Then as we go down here, we talk about how you have Profi OS 6.7, the operating system for your Profi board. It's the most current right now. It runs with a FET263's 2-button prop file, and we use his Kylo Ren film version blade styles for your blade effects on your blades. And then down here, starting with the next page, are your operation instructions. So the next several pages are just all the instructions on how to operate the lightsaber. It has 2 buttons. Controls while blade is off. There's more controls while blade is on. Make sure you pay attention not just to the buttons and things like that, but pay attention to the orientation of the saber as well. Some of the things, for example here, next font, hold auxiliary, long click power, parallel or up, because if you do that same thing and you're pointing down, you actually go backwards on your fonts. So I know some of my customers before get mixed up on that. I think they're just really excited when they get their saber and they just looking at these really fast, but just go really slow, read the instructions all the way through and take your time. It's going to take a little while to learn how to use it just because it does so much. So here's your paperwork. Keep that handy whenever you get your saber. So you got some nice foam on top, okay? And then this is what the inside of your box will look like. Your blade plugs will actually be inside of the emitters just to keep everything like that. But I'll start with your blade plugs. These are metal, which you normally would not be able to use with NeoPixel Connect blade connectors inside your emitters because if they touch the bottom, they would short your electronics, and we don't want to fry that stuff up. So I print covers to go on the bottom. These are resin printed covers that I've painted black, and they're glued onto the bottom, so you are able to use your blade plugs. So all 3 of your blade plugs have resin printed bottoms. So that's totally okay to use those. You got your sticker in here still. You got your plaque, which when I got this was actually completely out of the wrapper and just bouncing around inside your box. So I actually put it back in the wrapper and I use a little painter's tape just to tape it up so it isn't flying out. We don't want this scratched and we don't want your saber scratched. So that's in there. On the left side here, you have your battery charger. This is your Nitecore portable USB lithium ion battery charger. This is the only charger I recommend using to charge your 21700 lithium ion battery, 5000 milliamp hours, 15 amp max continuous discharge. So this is the big boy battery we got that's going to power your crossguard. Also in here is a little Ziploc baggie that has 2 Allen wrenches inside of it. The bigger Allen wrench is for the set screws that assemble and disassemble your hilt, and the smaller one are all three of your blade retention screws in your emitters. So you'll need those to put your blades in and out. On a separate part of this video later on, we'll go over how to do your blades. So I'm just going to set this all aside for now. I'll go ahead and get the hilt out. There it is in all of its glory. So we'll talk about the hilt and some of the modifications I do to it. The first one, we'll start at the top. The main blade set screw was a lot smaller. I upsized it to an M3 so that it also matches your side blade set screw sizes. The one in here before was too small to do a good job of holding the blade in it. It was actually super hard to get the Allen wrench in there and turn it. So I make that bigger and I make it an M3 size. Also in the emitters, there's a bolt in each of these emitters, and then there's 3 bolts coming into the top central core and 3 bolts going into the bottom. I use the Blue 42, Blue 242, this stuff right here, Loctite, the removable Loctite thread locker on all of those bolts, so that all of this stuff is solid and there's no jiggling and wobbling of any of those components. Next, when you first get this lightsaber, the handle has some wobble in it because the holes where these set screws, these 3 set screws here that assemble the hilt, where those go into the central core, the holes where the handles were just through holes. They were not threaded. So I actually thread them. I drill and tap all these holes and make them a little bit bigger. I go from M3 is what the original size was, and I go up to an M4 so that I can thread the holes in the handle. So now when you screw these 3 set screws in, they actually thread into this handle and really bring all this together, making it very solid to eliminate any wobble or rattle. I got your clips super glued in there. I have the bottom of the red wire glued in with E6000 so that won't come out. I actually use a little bit bigger size drill bit to make that hole bigger so that the red wire actually fits inside of there. And then at the top here, it's tucked in nicely on the other side. You'll see when I disassemble it, this top one is glued in place. You never have to worry about that. It's just glued in place and it won't come out. And then the wire is split here and just tucks into that clip for assembly and disassembly. But once it's in there, you can't even tell that it's cut. Let's see. Let's go ahead and open it up. What you'll need first is a pair of like plastic. I recommend plastic or some non-metal, non-metallic, something soft, tweezers to get your main button out. I'm actually gonna grab some right now. So I got some ceramic ones right here, just because you don't want to scratch this up too much, so we wouldn't recommend metal ones. But you see how there's little notches in the main button? You're gonna use some tweezers. You're gonna get a hold to that button and pull straight up and out because it is held in by a magnet. See the magnet here on the bottom? When you look down inside of there, you can see the magnets on the switch. So it's easy when you're assembling, it just drops in, but to take it out, that's really the only way to do it, is kind of grab it and pull it out. Next step, we're gonna move the red wire like I showed you earlier. Just gonna go ahead and untuck that. And then next, we're gonna remove all three of these screws. Get my wrenches. So we're gonna go ahead and remove all 3 of these all the way out. Make sure you don't drop and lose them. We're disassembling a hilt so that we can get inside to insert the battery, and power it up. So once I have all three of these out, I'm gonna kind of hold it by the emitters, kind of upside down like this, so that I can take this handle and lift it up and off, okay? Just like that. So I do it very gently, very carefully. This bottom handle piece here is just a shell, I guess you could say. It doesn't really have any functional electronics or anything like that inside of it. It's just a shell. So we set that inside the box, keep it nice and protected. Then next, since I have this, I'm gonna go ahead and say it now at the start while I have this off. Never ever handle the hilt once it's disassembled. Never handle it by the chassis, okay? You don't want to put weight on this chassis where it goes up into the metal hilt, because this chassis is resin printed, okay? It's susceptible to cracking and breaking. So you never want to handle that or mishandle it by handling the saber when it's disassembled by the chassis. That's a no-no. You always want to handle your saber by the metal side of the lightsaber, and then be gentle with the lightsaber when it's disassembled. This resin printed chassis, these can be delicate. They are susceptible to cracking and breaking. I'm not saying it's like thin glass or anything like that. I'm just saying take your time and be careful. Don't be swinging this around and whack something with it. But anyway, so yeah, don't handle it by the chassis, handle it by the metal. Next thing we do is we're gonna take this shell. This is also a shell. We're just gonna slide it up and off, just like that, okay? Now you can see down inside there where I have the red wire, you can see the E6000 I used to glue the red wire down. And then it's super glued on this side inside of the clip. So that red wire is tucked nicely right there and it never comes off. So I'm gonna put this inside the box too. And now we'll look at the kind of central core of your lightsaber, right? So here we have the blue wire, which I snip the ends, bring them together with heat shrink, and then I use E6000 to glue it in right and hold it in place right there. In the bottom, it just kind of free hangs. That way it kind of sticks out a little bit more. It gives it more of a three-dimensional look versus it being all the way down on the engine itself. So you got two switches. This is your main switch here, which I use an extra magnet to make it a little bit higher, okay? That way the button sticks up a little bit further. I like it to do that. The bottom magnet is glued onto the tactile switch underneath of it using E6000, so be careful and make sure you don't rip that off. It's pretty tough stuff though. I doubt you'd be able to unless you meant to. Here's your auxiliary switch. I'm still gonna sand this down a tiny bit. It's a tiny bit high, and I noticed earlier when testing, the auxiliary was sticking a little bit, so this needs to be a tiny bit shorter. So I'm gonna sand that down a little bit, but that's your auxiliary. Whenever you're sliding this shell on and off, you need to make sure not to knock that off. So always go slow, take your time. Inside of your emitters, you have your stock Custom Works version 3 NPXL connectors. Each of these has 16 LEDs and light up the emitters beautifully whenever your blades are removed. So now we'll move on to your chassis. So this is the first cross guard I've done with the resin printed chassis. This chassis isn't any different really in the design of my other ones. I really like this design actually. This one's just resin printed instead of PLA printed. I had a PLA printed one that I was going to use for years, but I just happened to get a resin printer right around the time I started your install, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to resin print them one. So I did. So this one was actually done in like a smoky black color. It was almost like clear, so I did paint it with black acrylic paint just to kind of black it up, make sure it wasn't see-through. But I know you said you wanted to do your own painting and weathering on your chassis, so I didn't do anything than that. I just put the base coat black on there, and I'll leave it black for you. You got 3 little set screws here that hold the chassis in place. This is your battery compartment here. Okay, we got the positive tab up at the top. You can see red wires underneath it. That's how you know it's positive. And then down here at the bottom is the spring side, negative side. Okay, spring is always negative. So when you put your battery in, you'll need to look at your label and make sure that you have the negative side of the battery going against the spring. You have to line this up appropriately. You can't get excited and put it in backwards because you can risk damaging your electronics if you do that. So as we go back to look at the other side of more of the chassis, we got the Imperial Starship light panel design down the side. And then over on the top side here, we got your Profi board version 2.2. Like we said at the beginning, running OS 6. And your SD card has all your sound fonts and a configuration file on it. You also have a little bit of what I use is called liquid electrical tape over some of the points where I solder, wires into the pads, just as an added layer of protection in case that board were to pop up and touch the inside of the metal handle. We don't want any shorts, so that's why I use that stuff. Just an extra layer of protection. So the Profi board, though, is pressed down inside of this chassis. It is pretty secure. It probably won't come up, and I don't recommend taking or lifting it up. If you want to access the USB port, all you do is just lift up and remove the wire cover. So here's your wire cover. I actually have an extra one of these I was going to give you. What did I do with it? Yeah, this one had a little bit of a chipped, cracked edge on it, so I printed another one. It's a bit longer too, so it works even better as a wire cover. So this is the other one I printed you. I might need to sand it down a little on the edges so it fits perfectly. But anyway, you lift up the wire cover, you take it out. Be careful with it too, it's susceptible to breaking. And this kind of exposes the wires underneath from the speaker, from the NeoPixel ring down here, I'll show you in a minute, and the negative lines. So those wires obviously are ugly, we don't want to see them, so I use wire covers. But you take this out and you can access your micro USB port, okay? You do not need to remove the SD card. I don't recommend trying to remove it. Once you plug up with your data USB cable, you will need a data version, not just a charging version USB cable. But once you plug that up and you plug into your computer, give it a minute or two, and after it dings and updates the drivers and all that stuff, the SD card contents will pop up on your computer. It'll show all the fonts, and you'll see on there your Saber's configuration file too that you can use as a template if you want to do adjustments. Be careful whenever you're so whenever you do plug up with a USB cable, be careful whenever you're removing it. You don't want to lift straight up because you can possibly rip that port off. You want to lift out or pull out and then lift up. Okay, you always got to pull out. So let me put this back in. So when you put this back in, it'll just press into the groove here. This one I need to sand a little bit on the edges just so it fits perfectly. But that'll go in there. Now moving to the bottom, like I said, we got a NeoPixel ring. So you got an 8 NeoPixel ring on the bottom, an accent ring. This will illuminate out the bottom of the hilt, out of the handle there where we have holes for sound venting. That light will shine through and kind of light up this lower engine. It's not super bright, but it's just enough where you can see it, kind of show it off. So this is really bright and beautiful. I just have it pulsing whenever the Saber is retracted, and when the Saber ignites, it just mirrors whatever the main blades are doing, basically Kylo's Unstable style. It also has a hole in the middle of it, so we can still have sound come out from your speaker. So I got a 3-watt, 8-ohm speaker from the Saber Merchant in there. Beautiful sounding speaker. Sounds amazing, high quality. It's the only speakers I use anymore. I love his speakers. So that's in there. But yeah, let's get a battery in this thing and get it fired up. So like I said, make sure you read your label on your battery, get it put in straight. Whenever you put this in too, like we talked about at the beginning, hold the Saber by the metal, not the chassis. And when you put this battery in, you're not going to apply sideways directional force on the chassis because you don't want to snap it off. You're just going to put this battery in and push down against that spring. Literally, it's so easy with one finger you can do it. And I'm kind of supporting the chassis with these fingers. So you just push against that spring and then push the positive end in. And then to take it out, the same, you just push down against that spring, then pull out the positive end, just like that. Okay, I'll do it a couple times just to show you how easy it is. So as you can see, it's pretty easy. So we got a boot sound, okay, so that indicated to us that the Saber now has power. We can see the NeoPixel ring here at the bottom doing a very slow pulse, okay? And if we were to hit our power button, you can see our emitters light up. So we're good to go. Now, I do not recommend playing with the saber while it's disassembled. Like we talked about at the beginning, it is delicate in the state. So once you get your battery in, once you've looked at it, done your configuration, whatever you're gonna do, put it back together just to be safe. So we're gonna hold it upside down again. We're gonna start with this shell here. We're gonna slide down all the way to the bottom, okay, gently, being mindful of that auxiliary switch. We always want to line up the blue wire with the gash. That's how you know you got that. And then we'll slide on the handle. So with the handle where your auxiliary switch is here, there's a gap right there in the top of your handle, and that's what we're trying to line up here. Just like, watch that red wire, it gets caught right there. But we're gonna line up that. Now, once we get that together, then we're just gonna hold it sideways, and we're gonna look inside the little holes here, and we're gonna line all this up. And then just using our hands, we're just gonna put in the screws and we're gonna start the threading. We're not gonna go all the way tight yet. We're just gonna get that threading started. And then the one here in the middle. Now, I like to get them in like that and get them started. And then I like to bring the saber upright, give it a little shake. That way everything kind of lines up appropriately. Then I like to screw the middle one all the way down first, but I don't go super tight. I just go till it stops, and then I do the two side ones. And again, I'm just going till these stop, right?
I killed nothing. My boy.
That auxiliary switch, I still need to trim down a little bit because I want it to click more. You know what? I'm gonna do that right now. Okay, so I sanded it down a smidge. Probably should have done that before the video, but it is what it is. So you're just gonna thread these in. Just get it started. Get that little shake. Tighten this one down all the way. Then the sides. Once I get them down to where they stop, then I go back and tighten them about 1/8 of a turn, just so the handle and the whole saber is very secure and tight. So I'd give it a little 1/8 turn, 1/8 turn, 1/8 turn.
I know what I have. I killed.
There we go.
Nothing standing over you.
I got it perfectly clicky now.
My boy. Show me again. The power of the darkness.
All right, so once you get those three in, then you take your red wire, tuck it into the clip, okay? And then lastly, you take your main button and you just drop it in its little hole, okay? And it's magnetic. Beautiful. There's your ring lighting out the bottom.
No one has been able to get out of you what you did with the map. I
so there's a little demo without the blades in. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the blades now. So these are your side blades. Okay, these are the ones you sent me from the Proplicator. I have NeoPixel strips installed inside of them. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and whenever you put these in, so here's all the rules with your blades. When you put your blades in, they just go straight in and straight out because they go in against spring-loaded pins, okay? But what you don't want to do is put the blades in and twist, okay? Because if you twist, you could possibly bend the pins, and you don't want to do that. That would damage them. So you just want to go straight in, okay? So I'm going to push this all the way down against those spring-loaded pins. Tighten down the set screw. Doesn't need to go super far down, just enough to hold the blade in. Turn these around. So you get it lined up. Hold pressure against those spring-loaded pins as you tighten down the set screw. I like to do the sides first and then the main, or I guess you could do the main and then the sides, whatever you wanted. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna turn the camera now and so I can do the main blade. All right, so I got the camera turned now. Got the saber, wrench, and here is your main blade. So the main blade it's 36 inches long. About like 1.5 inches, maybe an inch goes down inside the main emitter. But then you also have your flame tip that you sent me, and the flame tip is probably like 2.5 inches itself. So that's pretty long. And then you have your Proplicator unstable base sleeve. Okay, NeoPixel on the inside. So again, no twisting. Just push it straight down against those pins. It's a nice snug fit. You'll know once it's fully seated, and then use your wrench and tighten down that set screw. Get it tight to hold the blade in, but don't go so tight that you strip out that little hole. You don't want to over tighten it, okay? And then your sleeve kind of just slides, so just slide it down, okay? Let me kill these lights real quick. We'll fire it up. There it is, man.
You still want to kill me? It's hardly making sense, is it?
This thing's ginormous, but the cross guard is ginormous. Whoop, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you have gesture controls. You can either twist on, or you can fail, or you can stab on like that. Or I think it's called thrust on, sorry. And then you can twist off. So you kind of do a back and forth. You can change color. That's lightning block.
Red, orange, red, dark orange, orange, gold, yellow, green, aquamarine, cyan, deep sky blue, Dodger blue.
So if you don't want to do blue, you can do that. If you leave this font and come back, it will save it. But it's pretty easy to change it back.
I know what I have to do. I killed Snoke. I'll kill you. I'll let nothing stand in our way. My boy, show me again.
So
The power of the darkness.
some of your fonts too, you have the choice of simultaneous blade ignition or staggered. If you're pointing up, all blades at once. This one came loose. Figures. All the bad stuff happens to me on video. So yeah, make sure you get that set screw tight. Alright. Trying to be careful with it because I'm in this basement and the ceilings are kind of low and this is really long. Anyway, so if you're facing up, simultaneous blade ignition, right? But if you're facing down, you can get staggered where main goes and then sides, right? And then some fonts, like the next one here, it's just always staggered. Like the long one. Like this one. It's the best one. So anyway, there it is, man. I'm gonna do one more part of this video to talk to you about the boxing when I box it up. So let me see if it fits. I don't think it fits. So because of that flame tip, right? Because this blade is so long, these boxes I got a bunch of them. They're 36 inches long, right? But the blade with that flame tip on there doesn't quite fit, right? It's a smidge too long. So here's what I'm gonna do. When I pack this in there, I'm gonna take the flame tip off, okay? Now, it's not actually glued in here. It actually kind of plugs in. It's actually such a perfect fitment that you can just push it on. It's seated in there and it won't fly off. But you can kind of just pull it off too if you want. So I'm just gonna put it in there like this. I'm gonna wrap this up obviously, but I'm gonna gently kind of bend the LED strip over. But you got about 5-6 LEDs right there that go up into the flame tip to illuminate it. But when you get this, you'll carefully unwrap that. You'll just gently straighten the LED strips. Then you'll just take your little tip and you'll just push it on there, just like that. And you'll see it's a super secure fit. You really don't need any glue at all on that tip right there. So that's how I'm going to ship it to you. So when you get it, don't freak out and be like, where's my tip? But it'll be in there. It won't fit in the box. It's too long. But yeah. Thank you for choosing me to install your saber. I hope you love the crossguard when you get it. It's an amazing lightsaber. Take care of it. Watch this video. Go slow.